It was the last Friday of October, and Halloween was just around the corner. My friend Connor had invited me to a party that night, but I wasn't really feeling it. I'm not the biggest fan of parties, especially when I don't know most of the people there. But Connor can be pretty persuasive. Plus, his parents were out of town, and he was staying with his older sister, Chantel. So I figured it wouldn't be too bad. Just a chill night with friends. I threw on a security staff shirt Connor had dug out from his dad's old work uniform stash. He wore a similar one, and we joked about how we were the most uncreative costumes at the party. After a few rounds of video games at Connor's place, we headed out, joining a group of high school friends at a neighborhood house party. The place was packed. The music was loud, and people were crammed into every room. I quickly lost track of Connor in the crowd, so I ended up hanging with some other friends from school. The night dragged on, and I wasn't really feeling it anymore. It was late, and I was tired. I decided to head back to Connor's house and crash on his couch for the night. As I was about to leave, Connor caught up with me. "Hey man, can you grab some drinks from the basement for me? I'll catch up later," he asked. I didn't think much of it. The basement was dark and a little musty, but I'd been down there before. As I was rummaging through the fridge, a cold chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, a man appeared out of the shadows, dressed in a long black cloak. He was tall and gaunt, his face partially hidden by the hood. "Hey," he said, his voice low and raspy. "I'm the host's cousin. You haven't seen them around, have you?" Something about him didn't sit right with me. His eyes were too intense, like he was studying me. My heart pounded in my chest. I faked a quick smile and shrugged. "No, haven't seen them. I was just heading out." I grabbed the drinks and quickly made my way upstairs, trying to shake off the encounter. The party suddenly felt suffocating, so I left and walked back to Connor's house alone. By then, the street was quiet. The chilly night air helped calm me down a little. When I got back to the house, it was dark, and Chantel's car wasn't in the driveway. I guessed she wasn't home yet, and I assumed Connor would be back soon. I set my stuff down and collapsed on the couch, exhausted. It wasn't long before I started hearing faint footsteps upstairs. I figured it was Connor or Chantel. The footsteps moved slowly, almost deliberately, from one end of the house to the other. Something about them felt off. "Connor?" I called out, but there was no answer. I got up, my heart racing again. As I crept toward the stairs, the sound of the footsteps stopped. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, peering into the darkness, and that's when I saw him. The man from the basement. He was standing at the top of the stairs, staring down at me. His face was still partially hidden by the hood, but his presence was overwhelming. My legs locked in place, fear gripping me. My mind raced with questions. How did he get here? Why was he following me? I didn't wait for answers. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My voice shook as I explained the situation to the dispatcher, trying to keep my eyes on the man. But before the police arrived, the man disappeared from the top of the stairs, leaving only silence behind. When the police finally showed up, they searched the house. At first, they didn't find anything. I began to doubt myself, wondering if my mind had been playing tricks on me. But then, they found him. The man had been hiding under Chantel's bed. The officers arrested him, and as they led him away, one of them explained that the man had been watching Chantel for weeks. He'd been lurking around the neighborhood, waiting for a chance to get closer to her. The police suspected that he'd followed me home from the party, hoping to find her alone. The thought made my skin crawl. I couldn't shake the image of him standing at the top of the stairs, his eyes locked on me. That night changed everything. I was relieved the police had arrived in time, but the fear lingered. I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't called for help. What if he had stayed hidden a little longer? All I know is that something terrible could have happened, but somehow I got lucky. I grew up in a small town in the middle of nowhere. a place forgotten by time. The streets were lined with abandoned churches, their windows shattered and doors creaking in the wind. Old, crumbling houses sat next to empty fields, and the few people who still lived there were as strange as the place itself. Life wasn't easy. We barely had enough to get by, but things got a little better once my siblings and I were old enough to work odd jobs in town. I never thought much of dating, not until I matched with a girl named Kelly on one of those apps. Kelly wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. She was adventurous, curious, always looking for something new. We'd been seeing each other for a few months when October rolled around. The air had just started to cool, and with Halloween coming up, we were looking for something different to do. That's when we saw it, a poorly made sign on the side of the road advertising a pumpkin patch. "Let's check it out," Kelly said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. We turned down a dirt road, our tires kicking up dust as we drove deeper into the countryside. After a few minutes, we came to a clearing. There was a small, run-down house sitting in front of a pumpkin patch. The house looked like it had been there forever, weathered and sagging, but behind it, the pumpkins stretched out in neat rows. As we got out of the car, an older couple appeared on the porch. They waved and smiled at us, their faces wrinkled but friendly. "Welcome," the woman called out. "You can take any pumpkin you like, no charge." Kelly and I exchanged a glance. It seemed too good to be true, but we thanked them and walked toward the patch. Most of the pumpkins were small, soft, and rotting, but eventually, we found one. Big, bright orange, and perfect. As we carried it back toward the house, we realized the older couple was gone. The porch was empty, the windows dark. "Maybe they went inside," I muttered, feeling a shiver run down my spine. Kelly shrugged. "Weird, but whatever. Let's go." We put the pumpkin in the trunk and were about to drive off when a man came running out of the house, waving his arms angrily. He was middle-aged, disheveled, and out of breath. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" he yelled. Startled, I rolled down the window. We were just taking a pumpkin. The couple said..." "What couple?" he snapped. "There's no one here but me." Kelly and I froze, exchanging a look of confusion. "There was an older man and woman," Kelly said slowly. "They were on the porch when we arrived." The man's face twisted in anger. "You're lying. I live here alone. Now get out of here before I call the police." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Something wasn't right. We didn't argue, just apologized and drove away as fast as we could. The drive back was quiet, the weight of the man's words hanging in the air between us. When we got home, Kelly tried to laugh it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Who were those people? And why had they disappeared? The next day, I told my siblings about what happened. My younger brother Sam was curious and decided to check it out for himself. A couple of days later, he and his girlfriend drove out to the same place. When they got back, Sam's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "There's no older couple," he said, his voice shaking. "It's just the man. He lives there alone, and he says he's been there for years." I felt my stomach drop. "Are you sure?" Sam nodded. He got real angry when we asked about the couple. He said no one's lived there except him, not in decades. A cold chill settled over me as the pieces started to fall into place. The couple we'd seen, smiling, friendly, offering us free pumpkins, they couldn't have been real. But they'd seemed so solid, so alive. Kelly and I never went back to that pumpkin patch, and the pumpkin we brought home, it rotted within days, faster than any pumpkin I'd ever seen. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I think about that couple. I wonder who they were and what happened to them. Maybe they're trapped there, bound to that place, waiting for the next unsuspecting visitors to stumble upon their haunted patch of earth. And every October, I still feel that chill, the eerie reminder that some places and some people never really leave. Halloween had always been special to me and my best friend, Valen. We had been roommates since freshman year of college, and now, as seniors, we found ourselves too old for trick-or-treating and too tired for parties. So, we decided to spend this Halloween night at home, baking cookies and watching scary movies. Around 8 p.m., we realized we were out of chocolate chips, so I offered to make a quick run to the nearby grocery store. The night was chilly, and the streets were filled with kids in costumes, laughing and running door to door. It reminded me of how much fun Halloween used to be before life got complicated with school, deadlines, and job applications. At the store, I grabbed the chips and some extra snacks. While browsing the aisles, I noticed someone at the other end, standing completely still, staring right at me. He was tall, with a messy beard and dull eyes. His gaze made my skin crawl, but I told myself I was being paranoid. It's Halloween, after all. People can be weird. I hurried through the checkout, trying to shake off the uneasiness, and left the store. The man was nowhere in sight as I drove back to our house. But as I pulled into our driveway, a car slowly passed by. It wasn't the speed that bothered me. It was how the car seemed to hover, like it was waiting for something. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't see who was inside. As soon as it passed, the driver sped off down the road. Feeling unsettled, I walked inside and mentioned the car to Valen. He just laughed it off, saying it was probably just someone lost or messing around because of the holiday. I tried to laugh along with him, but something in my gut told me this wasn't just a coincidence. We continued with our night, mixing the dough and setting the cookies in the oven. Just as we settled on the couch to watch a movie, the doorbell rang. We both froze. It was past 9 p.m., way too late for trick-or-treaters. Valen hesitated, then got up to check the door. I watched from the couch, my heart pounding in my chest. When he opened it, I heard him gasp. Can I help you?" Valen asked. I jumped up and rushed over. There, standing on our porch, was a man in a cheap plastic Halloween mask. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, breathing heavily. The mask was one of those generic kinds you'd find at any dollar store, but something about the way he loomed in the doorway made my blood run cold. Valen, looking uncomfortable, said, "Sorry, man, we're not giving out candy." He quickly shut the door and locked it. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice shaky. "No idea," Valen replied, trying to sound calm, but I could see the fear creeping into his eyes. "Just some guy in a mask." I peered through the peephole and saw the same car from earlier parked across the street, its engine idling. My heart dropped. "It's the same car from before," I whispered. Valen's eyes widened as he joined me at the door, looking out. Suddenly, we heard a loud thud from the basement. We both froze, staring at each other, trying to make sense of what was happening. Then came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, inside the house. Panic surged through me. "Someone's in the basement," I cried. Valen grabbed his phone and frantically dialed the police while I pressed my body against the basement door, hoping it would hold. Every second felt like an eternity. The footsteps continued for a few moments, then suddenly stopped. The silence was worse. Without waiting for the police to arrive, we bolted out of the house, jumped into Valen's car, and drove a few streets away. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely breathe. We sat there, staring at each other, waiting for the flashing lights of the police. When they finally arrived and we returned to the house, the basement window had been shattered. Glass littered the floor, but nothing had been taken. No sign of the man. And the car that had been parked outside was gone. It didn't take long for us to realize the truth. The man from the store had followed me home, watched us, and tried to get into the house. But for what reason? What did he want? The police assured us they'd patrol the area, but we didn't sleep that night. The eerie silence of the house was a reminder that we had been stalked, hunted, and that somewhere, out there, that man was still lurking, waiting. We never saw him again. But every Halloween, I can't help but wonder, Where is he now? And is he watching someone else? It was Halloween night, and I had just finished handing out candy to the last of the trick-or-treaters. It was around 7 p.m., and the streets had gone quiet. I lived alone in a small house at the edge of the neighborhood. It was always peaceful here, but tonight, a strange chill lingered in the air. I locked the front door and settled onto the couch, ready to unwind with a horror movie marathon. The flickering lights of the screen danced across the walls as the wind outside howled. Halfway through my first movie, I heard a knock at the door. Strange, I thought. It was well past the time for trick-or-treaters, but I assumed maybe a few latecomers were out and about. I paused the movie, walked to the door, and opened it. Standing there was a man in his mid-40s, wearing jeans and a worn-out jacket. His eyes looked tired, anxious even, and he shifted nervously on the spot. "Is Aaron here?" he asked in a low voice. "Aaron?" I repeated, confused. "I'm sorry, I don't know anyone by that name. I think you have the wrong house." The man frowned and peered inside my home, his eyes scanning the living room as if he expected to see someone hiding in the shadows. "Aaron's my son," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "He was out trick-or-treating, but he hasn't come home. I thought maybe he came here." I felt a shiver run down my spine. There was something off about the way he stood there, lingering at my door, his gaze far too intrusive. I stepped back slightly, putting a bit more distance between us. "No," I said carefully. "I haven't seen anyone by that name. I'm sorry." For a moment, we stood there in silence. His eyes met mine, but they seemed distant, as if he wasn't really looking at me, but through me. Then, without saying another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. I closed the door and locked it, feeling unsettled. Something wasn't right. Why would a father think his missing son would be in a stranger's house? I thought about calling the police, but hesitated. I didn't have much to tell them, just a strange man asking about a kid I didn't know. But the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. What if Aaron was really missing? What if something had happened to him? With a sigh, I picked up my phone and dialed 911. The operator listened patiently as I explained what happened. "Without more information, there's not much we can do," she said. "But we'll send a patrol car to check the area." I thanked her and hung up, hoping it was just a misunderstanding. But the feeling of unease clung to me, refusing to fade. An hour passed, and I tried to lose myself in the movie, but I couldn't shake the memory of the man's haunting eyes. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. Someone standing outside my window. My heart jumped into my throat. I turned my head, but by the time I focused, the figure was gone. I blinked, unsure if I had imagined it. The night outside was thick and dark, the wind still howling, making the trees bend and creak. I got up, cautiously approaching the window. Nothing. Just the empty yard and the streetlight flickering in the distance. I let out a shaky breath and stepped away, but no sooner had I sat down than a loud crash echoed through the house. The sound of shattering glass made my blood run cold. I ran to the window and saw it. One of the panes had been smashed in, shards of glass littering the floor. My hands trembled as I reached for the phone again, dialing 911. "Someone just broke my window," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Stay calm, sir," the operator replied. "Officers are on their way. Lock yourself somewhere safe until they arrive." I did as she said, hiding behind the curtains, peeking out every few seconds. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. When the police arrived, they found the broken window but no sign of the person who had done it. I explained everything: the man who came to my door, the shadow outside, the smashed window, but there was little they could do. No one in the neighborhood had reported a missing child, and they couldn't find any evidence of the mysterious man I had seen earlier. As the night wore on, The sense of dread lingered. Who was the man? Why had he come to my house? And why had someone attacked my window? Weeks passed, and no answers came. The man never returned, and no reports of a missing boy named Aaron ever surfaced. But every Halloween night since, I find myself waiting for that knock, wondering if the man will come back, still searching for his lost son. The fear never left me. I'm still haunted by the memory of those eyes, haunted by the idea that some things, once touched by darkness, never truly leave you.